Unfreezing the Ice Age. The authoritative account well, into the 19th century was that of James Osser, Archbishop of Armagh, first published in 1650, though it is important to note that none other than Sir Isaac Newton proposed an alternative calculation, suggesting the actual date was 3988 BC. The phrase "we owe to Thomas Trotman's 1992 account of this time revolution," while the field of anthropology came into existence during the decade of Darwin, i.e., between the publication of The Origin of Species in 1859 and The Descent of Man in 1871. It was not actually Darwinism, but archaeological excavations to establish the timescale of human prehistory as we know it. Geology path. The way replacing the biblically inspired view of Earth's genesis as a series of repeatedly upheavals with a more mechanic and gradual account of our planet's origins. More detailed studies of the early development of scientific prehistory and how fossil evidence and stone tools were first fitted into the expanded chronology of life on Earth can be found in Snap 1993 and Trigger 2006. The key findings are summarized in Scary et al. 2018. For an accessible account, see also Scary's feature article in New Scientist, published online 25 April 2018, as Origin of Our Species, Why Humans Were Once So Much So Diverse. The Sahara seems to have acted as a kind of turnstile for human evolution, periodically turning green and then dry again with the cyclical advance or retreat of monsoon rains, opening and shutting the gates of interaction between northern and southern parts of the African continent. See Scary 2017. Genetics assume, reasonably enough, that the fair amount of genetic admixture did take place. Grain et al. 2010. Reich et al. 2010. Fossil evidence tells us that the first expansions of modern humans out of Africa began as far back as two- 210,000 years ago. Awati et al. 2019. But these were often tentative and quite short-lived, at least until the more decisive radiations of our species began around 60,000 BC. Recent and historical hunter-gatherers, as we'll see, present an enormous range of possibilities for from associatively egalitarian groups like the Jew Hoansi of the Kalahari, the Mbengele Bayaka of Congo, Bayaka of Congo, or the Arta in the Philippines to assertively hierarchical ones like the populations of the Canadian Northwest Coast, the Calusa Florida Keys, of the forest-dwelling Guaycuru of Paraguay. These latter groups, far from being egalitarian, are known to have traditionally kept slaves and live in ranked societies. Holding up any particular subset of recent foragers as representatives of early human society is essentially a matter of picking cherries. Hardy 2009, Will Cornard and Trison 2019, with further references for important reviews and critiques of the Roman Revolution idea. C. McBetty and Brooks 2000, Melax et al. 2007. The term Venus figurine is still widely used but has links to scientific racism in the 19th and early 20th centuries when direct comparisons were drawn between prehistoric images and the anatomy of modern individuals considered living specimens of humanity in its primitive forms. A tragic example is the life story of Sarah Baartman, a Khoi woman who was exhibited around Europe as a freak owing to her large bulk protrudes under the stage name Hottentot Philus C. Cook 2015. Renfrew 2007. The case against a European exceptionalism was laid out by Sally McBetty and Alison Brooks in Key publication and has since been has since been supplemented by discoveries in South Asia, James and Patagia 2009 and Africa, Delino et al. 2018, Shipton et al. 2018, Albert et al. 2018. Conceivably, this included the making of carved art Hoffman et al. 2018. Recent efforts to estimate the overall human population at the start of the Upper Paleolithic, known as the Aurignacian period, suggest a mean figurine of just 1,500 people of the whole of Western and Central Europe, which is remarkable now. Smith and Zimmerman, 2019. For the relationship between demographic density and enhanced cultural transmission in Upper Paleolithic Europe, see the 2009 arguments of Powell, Shannon, and Thomas. These of use only a last resort and usual extreme measures are employed to ensure is rarely called for. In rural Madagascar, for instance, when police were effectively absent, the usual rule was that one only lynch such a person if its parents gave permission first, which was usually effective as a way to simply drive the person out of town. D. Graeber, Field Observation, from 1999 3-4. Initially, but it but as it turns out wrongly, though to be a boy and girl. For new genetic evidence on this point, see Sikora et al. 2017. Again, more genetic studies of the group Buria adolnifestotisi have confirmed the male identity of all three Burias, which was previously in Dub Mitnick 2016. Evidence from these various sites is usually summarized and evaluated in Petit 2011 with further references, and see also Wengrow and Grabe 2015. See White 1999, Van Haren and De Irico 2005. Inheritance is hardly the possible explanation for the association of wealth with children in many societies where wealth circulates freely. For instance, where it's socially impossible to refuse a request to hand over one's necklace or bracelet to an admirer, a lot of ornament ends festoning children to keep it out of circulation. If elaborate ornaments were buried in part to take them of circulation, so as not the create so as not to create invidious instance, burying them with children might be the ideal way to accomplish this. Smith 2006 and for a confident digest see also. As printed by Harkley and Gover 2020, based on geometrical regularities and correspondences found among the ground plants of some tree large enclosures, but those remain, as this study doesn't take into account the complex and dynamic construction sequences between that lie between the enclosures and compares building phases that are strictly contemporaneous. As Morglu and Robinson 2009 679, and see also Dietrich et al. 2019, Flannery and Marcus 2012 128, 331. For the monumental character of mammoth structures in their Ice Age settings, see over 1985, Yakov Leva 2019 325 333. As we note below, current research by Mikhail Sabin, Natasha Reynolds, and colleagues so the term mammoth houses of the wing may well be misleading in some cases. In fact, the precise functions of these impressive structures may have varied considerably across regions and periods. See also Pryor et al. 2020 for the massive wooden enclosures as evidence of large seasonal gatherings. Tova 2015. Sabine, Reynolds, Itzevic, and Germont manuscript in preparation, made available to us by courtesy of Natasha Reynolds. Ibid. In fact, even small children are typically far more imaginative than this, and as we all know, spend a considerable part of their time constructing alternative worlds and symbolic worlds to inhabit. Rored L. Kelly, in his magisterial survey of the foraging spectrum, offered a clear statement of the problem concerning the stereotyping of forager populations, urging a study of hunter-gatherer prehistory in terms other than broad topological contrasts, such as generalist versus specialist, simple versus complex, storing versus non-storing, or immediate versus delayed return. Still, we note that in the remaining part of his study, Kelly himself maintains just such a broad dichotomy between egalitarian and non-egalitarian hunter-gatherers as distinct types of society with supposedly fixed internal characteristics, tabulated as a binary contrast between simple versus complex forms. Kelly 2013 242 Table 9.1. The British historian Kate Thomas, for instance, compiled a whole list of casual rejections of Christianity from medieval and Renaissance English sources. The Bishop of Exeter complained in 1600 that in his diocese it was a matter very common to dispute whether there be a God or not. In Essex, a husbandman of Bradwell near the sea was said to hold his opinion that all things come by nature, and thus affirmed this as an atheist. Edwin, Edwin Rutland in 1633, Richard Sharp was accused of saying there is no God and that he had no soul to save. From Durham in 1635 came the case of Brian Walker, who, when asked if he did not fear God, retorted that I do not believe there is either God or devil, neither will I believe anything but what I see. As an alternative to the Bible, he commended the book called Culture. The difference, of course, is that while expressing such opinions among the Winnebago might make you a figure of one under the government of Queen Elizabeth or King James, it could get you into serious trouble, as evidenced by the fact that we know most of these people because of trial documents. 33. Badelman, 1971, 391 2. The account assumes that prophets are male, but there are documented cases of female prophets as well. Douglas Johnson, 1997, provides the definitive history of newer prophets in the early 20th century. Levi Strauss, 1967, 1944, 61. Lee and Devore, 1968, 11. It's worth noting, perhaps, that Levi-Strauss offered a forlorn epilogue to Man the Hunter, which is not read anymore. Formicola 2007 surveys the evidence, and see also Trinkaus 2018, Trinkaus and Buzilova 2018. This is the general pattern. Petit 2011. Of course, it is not completely universal The Romito dwarf, for example, does not seem to have been buried with grave goods. Archaeologists have observed close spatial associations between Upper Paleolithic Magdalenian aggregation sites in the French Périgord and natural choke points or bottlenecks along the Dordogne and Weser, such as forts or menders. Ideal locations for intercepting herds or reindeer of their seasonal migrations. White 1985. In northern Spain, the famous cave sites of Altamira and Castile have long been identified as aggregation locales based on their topographical location and their preponderance of seasonal resources like deer, ibex, and shellfish among the animal remains found there. Strauss, 1977. On the periglacial mammoth-rich steppe of central Russia, spectacularly large settlements like Meziri and Menzin, with their mammoth-borne dwellings, fixed storage pits, and abundant evidence of what and trade were aligned and major river systems Neper and Desna, which also channeled the annual north-south movements of steppe bison, horse, reindeer, and mammoth. Sover, 1985. Similarly, the Pavlov Hills of southern Moravia, where Doni Festonici is located, once formed part of a narrow belt of forest steppe, bridging the non-glaciated zones of Eastern and Western Europe. See contributions of Jiri Spoda in Robox et al. 2000. Year-round habitation was certainly possible in some of these locations, but population densities are still likely to have fluctuated markedly between seasons. Recently, archaeologists have begun using more fine-grained analytical techniques like the microscopic study of growth patterns in animal teeth and antlers, as well as measuring biological processes of seasonal variation, such as stable isotope ratios in animal remains, to determine the migration patterns and diets of hunted game. Of a useful survey, see Predegas et al. 2018, Lang et al. 2013, L. Dietrich et al. 2019, grinding slabs, stone blocks, hand ponders, pestles, mortar, pestles, and mortars are all found in impressive numbers at Gobekli Tepe, and see also Dietrich et al. 2012. Part version 2012 provides a detailed survey and interpretation of archaeology of Stonehenge, including the results of recent fieldwork. The argument of Neolithic aristocracy is based on close analysis and dating of human remains associated with different phases in the construction of Stonehenge, which prove consistent with the idea that the first stone cycle was linked to a high status cemetery where the cremated remains of a nuclear family were placed around the start of the 3rd millennium BC. Subsequent removals and rebuildings, including the incorporation of massive sarsen stones, were apparently linked to ongoing mortuary rituals at the same family's lineage, presumably expanded in size and status over a period of centuries. 41. For the rejection of cereal farming in prehistoric Britain during periods of megalithic construction. C. Stevens and Fuller 2012. For the seasonality of winter meat wasting at Durrington Walls as detected from tooth remains. See Wright et al. 2014. Feiner et al. 2010. Madwig et al. 2019. Of course, humans are not alone in this. Non-human primates like chimpanzees and bonobos also vary the size and structure of their groups on a sectoral basis according to the changing distribution of edible resources in what primatologists call fission-fusion systems. Dunbar 1988. So too, in fact, do all sorts of other gregarious animals. But what Mouse was talking about and what we're considering here is categorically different from this. Uniquely, the for humans such alternations also involve corresponding changes in moral, legal, and ritual organization, not just strategic alliances, but entire systems of roles and institutions are liable to periodically disassembled and reconstructed, allowing for more or less concentrated ways of living at different times of year. 44. Moss and Burkhardt, 1979. 1905. It was, it's worth noting that politics wasn't the aspect of social variations they themselves chose to emphasize, being more concerned with the contrast between secular and ceremonial arrangements and the effects this had on the self-consciousness of the group. E.g., winter is a season when Eskimo society is highly concentrated and in a state of continual excitement and hyperactivity because individuals are brought into close contact with one another. Their social interactions become more frequent, more continuous and coherent. Are exchanged, feelings are mutually revived and reinforced. By its existence and contact and constant activity, the group becomes more aware of itself and assumes a more prominent place in the consciousness of individual. P. 76. It's certainly no coincidence that so much of calculus art plays visually on the relation of name, person, and role, relation laid open to scrutiny by their seasonal practices. Levi Strauss, 1982. Lowy, 1948, 18. One doesn't find in these plains military societies the germs of law and of the state. One finds that the germs, have germinated and grown up. They are comparable, not antecedent, to our modern state, and what would appear to be important problem for study is not the investigation of how one or, or grew out of the other, but what they have in common, which might throw light on the nature of law and state. Province, 1937, 365. Much of the rest of Lois' essay focuses on the roles of chiefs, arguing that the power of political leaders over the anarchic societies of the Americas was so carefully circumscribed as to exclude the emergence of permanent structures of coercion. Insofar as indigenous states developed there, he concluded it could only have been through the power of prophecy, the promise of a better world, with religious figures claiming authority directly from the gods. A generation later, Pierre Clusters made almost exactly the same argument in his 1974 essay, Society Against the State. He follows Lewis so closely that he can only have been directly inspired. While Lewis is not last forgotten, Clusters is remembered for arguing that stateless societies do not represent any evolutionary stage. The notion of higher organization but are based on the self-conscious and principled rejection of coercive authority. Interestingly, the one element not carried over from Lowy to clusters is that of seasonal variations in modes of authority, and this is despite the fact that clusters himself focused largely on Amazonian societies, which did in fact have very different structures at different times of year. See Maybury Lewis, ed. in 1979. A common and logical objection to Cluster's argument, which remains hugely influential, is to ask how Amazonian societies could have consciously organized themselves against the emergence of forms of authority they never actually experienced. It seems to us that bringing seasonal variations back into the debate goes a significant way to resolving this dilemma. Seasonal 49. Seasonal kings of lords like John Barleycorn, a variant, a variant of the sacred ruler, destined to end distant terror and be killed each year at harvest time, are stock figures of British folklore to this day, but there is still little agreement on how much further back they go beyond their earliest written mentions in the 16th century AD. The ubiquity of such temporary kings in European, African, Indian, and Greco-Roman myths and legend was the subject of Book 3 in James Fraser's The Golden Book, which he called The Dying God. Perhaps one reason why the published paper, Louis 1948, has been forgotten is because of the distinctly uninspiring title. Some aspects of political organization among the American Aborigines, Nike, 1991, discussed further by D. Graeber in Notes of the Politics of Divine Kingship, or Elements for an Archaeology of Sovereignty in Grabe and Sarlin's 2017, Chapter 7. On the carnivalesque, the classic text is Martin's Rabelais and his word. This is hardly the place to go into detail about the history of these debates, but it's interesting to observe that they emerge directly from Moss' research on seasonality, which he carried out in coordination with his uncle Émile Durkheim, who is considered the founder of French sociology in the same sense that Moss is of French anthropology in 1912. In the elementary forms of religious life, Durkheim relied upon Moss' research on indigenous Australian societies to contrast that they described as the ordinary economic existence of Australian bands concerned mostly with getting food, with the sense of their seasonal gatherings called corroboree. It was in the excitement of corroboree, he argued, that the power to create society appeared to them as if it were an alien force projected into totemic spirits and their emblems. This was the first formulation of the basic problematic that almost all theorists have been forced to grapple with ever since. The rituals are simultaneously moments where social structure is manifested and moments of anti-structure in which new social forms can pop up. British social anthropology, which took its initial theoretical inspiration primarily from Durkheim, walked to the problem in various ways, notably the work of Edmund Lear, Victor Turner, or Mary Douglas. The most sophisticated and to our minds compelling proposals, proposals for how to resolve the dilemma are currently Maurice Bloch's 2008 notion of the transcendental versus transactional realms and Seligman et al. 2008 argument that ritual creates a subjective or as if domain of order consciously set apart from a reality that is always seen in a contrasting light as fragmented and chaotic. Ritual creates a world which is marked off as standing apart from ordinary life, but also where essentially imaginary ongoing institutions like clans, empires, etc. exist and are maintained. 55. As Peter Book 2009 to 183 5 notes the idea that rituals of rebellion were simply safety valves or ways of allowing common folk to let off steam is first documented only 2 years after the invention of the steam engine. The favor metaphor before that had been to let off the pressure in a wine cask. At the same time, two medieval authorities were keenly aware of the fact that most peasant revolts or urban insurrections would begin precisely during such ritual moments. This ambivalence appears again and again. Rose already considered the popular festival to embody the spirit of revolution. Such ideas were later developed in Roger Calliope's seminal essay on the festival, written by George Bartels College de Sociologie, Trans, Trans 2001 and 1939. It went through the depths, the first holding forth the festival as a model of revolutionary social liberation, and the second holding it and the second holding it forth as a harbinger of fascism.